Today's guest is Les Landis, president of Landis and Associates, and author of the book Getting to the Heart of Employee Engagement. Les has spent his career helping organizations unlock the full potential of their people through employee engagement, communication, and culture transformation. Before founding his firm, he served as the head of communications for one of the world's largest food companies. Since then, he has become a trusted advisor and sought after speaker, known for his refreshing approach to avoiding the program trap and instead creating sustainable systems that actually bring out the best in people. So I'm excited to dive into his wisdom on leadership, culture, and employee engagement, because these are issues that every business leader grapples with, whether you're running a growing startup, a mid-sized firm, or a Fortune 500 enterprise. Les, it's great to have you today. Thanks for joining me.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm excited because, as you know, you and I used to be doing work together way back when. And when I got your call saying that you wanted me to be in here because you said your time has come or something like that. I can't remember
You were
exactly.
ahead of your time, Les. That's what I said. I said you were ahead of your time.
There you go.
So tell us why you think so many business leaders overlook the timeless ideas in favor of chasing the next new trend.
Yeah. You want me to make it simple?
I do.
New stuff is sexy. Old stuff is old.
Okay.
I mean, it's as simple as that. Too Good to Be New was actually a blog that we wrote some time ago. And that blog, we highlighted some of the books that have been written, I mean, to tell you 30, 40, 50, even 80 years ago that have powerful insights. But somehow people just get away from some of the fundamental basics and they decide they're going to go on and try something new, right? And I'm not saying we shouldn't. In fact, systematic continuous improvement, as you know, is one of the heartbeats of my system and my approach to doing things. And so you just have to make sure that you don't lose touch with the grounding of the thing. I mean, what, the 10 Commandments? Are we not going to pay attention to that anymore? How many years how old is that one, right?
I was literally, it's funny you say that because I was just thinking about the book of Proverbs. I mean, those are
Yeah,
timeless
exactly.
advice for life in general. So, what's one principle from your book that readers say helps them understand your approach to employee engagement?
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to tell you what the subtitle is. It's the power and purpose of imagination and free will in the workplace. And I contend that those two qualities, the capacity to choose to do things that maybe is not in our animal programs, is unique among all creatures. And then we have this capacity for imagination that allows us to conceive of things that do not exist in the natural world. Those two things together, if we don't optimize those things for human beings, a number of bad things happen in the organization. First of all, to the extent we keep people trapped in our animal programs, doing the same thing over and over again the same way, we can't excel. We can't look for new ways of doing things, exciting ways of doing things. And when we keep people trapped in their job descriptions without really engaging them and engaging their minds and their hearts and their souls and all of the opportunities for making improvements, we're not optimizing their humanity. And the second thing is, hell, you know this, adult human beings hate being told what to do.
So do kids.
So do kids, but for sure adult human beings. And if you really want to make sure that you optimize what people are capable of contributing, you have to allow them to kind of go outside of the boundaries of their job descriptions within certain guidelines. Obviously, that doesn't mean anybody can do anything they want to do anytime. But yeah, that's one of the fundamental core principles. There's a whole lot of others in there, as you know, but that's a fundamental one.
So, in your experience, what's the biggest blind spot CEOs have when it comes to engaging employees?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, there's probably a couple, but the biggest one is that people that leaders simply underestimate the potential that employees are capable of contributing to an organization to make things better than before all the time on a regular, continuous basis. They simply don't understand and appreciate that if we set up a systematic process for really engaging people, tapping into their hearts and their minds and the souls, they'll give us far more to elevate the quality of the organization, the quality of the work than most managers can even imagine.
It's funny you say that because I interviewed Chris Dyer, who recently he is ranked by Inc. magazine as the number one speaker on leadership culture. He was talking about when he ran a company, he had thousands of employees. and things weren't going well, and he had literally told his employees, like, "We're in trouble. I
Yeah.
need your help. What ideas do you have?" And they said, "Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing." He said they
Yep.
were and the reason they said nothing is because he hadn't told them the information. He hadn't given them the information. Once he gave them the information, he said, then not only did he get some ideas, but he got lots of ideas coming from everywhere, and many of them were much better than anything he would have come up with on his own.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying.
And here's the problem. That example is great, makes a great point about something that I stress all the time. If you really want to optimize the potential of human beings in the workplace, we have to remember that they are creatures of habit. We are creatures of habit, just like all other animal beings. And the only way to break that habit is to establish a habit for an intentional habit for improvement, to break the default habit of doing things over and over again the same way. So, what Dyer talked to you about was a one off. That's one of the things that I profess against. We got to stop doing one off actions and events and all of those kinds of things to just get ideas. So let's establish systems and processes that make systematic continuous improvement, getting ideas like that part of the job description.
Okay, so along those same lines, when you start talking about systems and things of those nature, I know that the next word that usually comes up is, well, we've got a program for this, or we've got a program for that. You often talk about avoiding the program trap. Can you share a story of a company that fell into it and how they turned things around?
Yeah, actually, I have kind of a funny one, and I actually talked about it in my book, which, by the way, is a business fable. So it's a lot more fun to read, but I captured the experience and put it in the book. So we're working with an organization, and we're trying to get some fundamental changes in the systems and the processes in order to really engage employees in continuous improvement and a variety of other things to help make the organization thrive. We talked quite often with the management team that we have to be careful not to get into the slogans and the phrases and all of the things that we think are going to get people jazzed up and tuned in, turned on. We showed up to work with an employee group one day, and a big banner across the front of the building was commitment to excellence. And we thought, my God, they're going into sloganeering. And so we got into the room with the employees and we just decided to ask them. We said, so tell us, what are your thoughts about that banner, that slogan out there? And nobody would talk. It was kind of silent. And finally, this one old guy who'd been up there at that company for a long time, one of those informal influencers, you know what those people are like. He said, well, let me tell you, he says, there are only two signs around here that mean anything. One is exit, and the other is wet paint, and everything else is a bunch of bullshit. And
Okay.
everybody in the room just broke up. I mean, they had mugs with the slogan on a commitment to excellence, right? And the point I continue to make is when we get caught up in those kinds of activities, Pizza Fridays and Employee of the Month awards, which are a terrible thing to do to a team. We need to make sure that we get rid of the focus on those things, because what really gets people tuned in, turned on, inspired and supported in being their best selves and doing their best work is not all of that icing on the cake. It's the freaking cake. We have to change the cake, the recipe for the cake. We've got to make sure we change the systems and the processes that tell people we really value you. And we're going to set up systems and processes that are going to make sure we tap everything that you're capable and willing to contribute.
Give me an example of a system or a process.
I've got about a dozen in my
Yeah,
toolkit.
just give me one or two good ones.
No, I'm going to give you one.
Okay, I'll take it.
I may give you a couple, but one for sure is simply the continuous improvement team huddle. And you get people together on a regular basis. And I recommend weekly, bi-weekly, no more, no less than once a month, facilitated by a supervisor. 4 to 8 people get together and they go through a very specific process for about 60 minutes. And the first thing that they do is, let's just take a look at what the key indicators are for our team. What are the things that are telling us we're doing a good job, we're not doing a good job? And if there are significant variances, we just have a quick conversation about what's going on here. Why did it go up? Let's do more of that. Why did it go down? Let's do less of that. Then the next thing, which is really the heart of it, is that we do a round robin with everybody on the team and say, give us one simple little idea. Now we emphasize small, because we don't want people to come up with things like, let's redesign the production process. I mean, who in the heck is going to do that, right? So, some simple little things. Maybe it's as simple as we've got the tools that we need to do this job over here 20 feet from where we're standing to do the work. Let's move it over here. And it's going to save us 5 steps in 10 seconds. Seems small, but when you get hundreds of those kinds of things building on top of one another, it's amazing what kind of impact it can have. So you do that, then you go around and you say, okay, you document it in real time. What's the idea? Who came up with it? Who's going to work on it? What's the first step or the next step? By whom, by when? What's a submission date? What's a target date? What's the actual completion date? You have a tracking form that you use to keep all of that stuff in the front of people every time they get together. And you just keep ticking this stuff off over and over and over again. The most important thing, equally important at the very end of this thing, we have a few minutes where we take time to acknowledge people for the contributions that they're making to us individually and to our team. If you want to do something that's really going to make people feel good, get rid of the Employee of the Month award, which only one employee can win every month by definition, and acknowledge people all the time, individually, personally, right in the moment. So that's one specific example. And I will tell you the impact that I have seen, the ideas that people have come up with when you build those things, hundreds of those over time, the impact is massive.
Gotcha. It's funny, like in a smaller organization, you don't need a committee to do that. You should just go be able to tell the owner, like, hey, I'm wasting a whole bunch of time moving this from this table over here. I need my tools closer. Can I do that? Sure. But that requires an environment where there's open communication between the employee and whether it's the owner or the supervisor or whatnot. And I know trust is a big thing. And if trust isn't there, people don't say anything. They just let it continue, which is why you might need in larger organizations some of those committees and whatnot. But obviously, trust plays a big role in building an engaged workforce. But if leaders screw that up,
Mm-hmm.
tips or ideas about ways leaders can go about repairing trust when it's been damaged.
Well, I want to go back to one of the premises that you had before. And then I'm going to talk about the trust. And if I get off track, remind me. One of the reasons that people don't walk into the door, even in a smaller organization, and say, hey, why don't I do this? Is because they're so focused on doing the work that they need to get out. They're so caught up in the habit, in the routine of getting the work out, that they just simply kind of say, well, that's just what it is. I got to get the work out. That's
I'm,
why I
I'm
had
going
to
to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you there for a second. I'm going to challenge you to think something here. I interviewed a guy by the name of Rob Gallagher a few months ago, and he wrote a book on profit sharing, where it was like, how do CEOs turn their employees into people who work as hard as they do and care as much as they do? And he came up with a brilliant way of engaging employees, because that way the employees had a vested interest. And instead of saying, oh, this is just what I do and this is what I've been told to do, I'm gonna keep my head down and do what I'm told, keep my mouth shut. He set up a way, and I thought his book was amazing. And the interview I learned a lot from him, but he literally talked about how to tie financial rewards to initiative and creativity and do problem solving, so that an employee would come to a boss and say, hey, I figured a way to save us money and save us time. You got any problem with me doing that? No, that's a great idea. Go ahead. So anyway, I didn't mean to divert you, but like,
Well, no, but let me go ahead and address that because again, I don't want to contradict what that individual said because I'm sure he's quite brilliant in his own arena.
I was very
And
impressed.
so here's the thing. If you want to have people, this is what they do at the great game of business. Give people a stake in the game, which is exactly what you're talking about.
It is.
Don't make it for every single idea. Make it for the overall performance of the
That's
entire
consistent.
organization.
He was very consistent about that.
Yeah.
Yes, I can go into all
Critically
of
important, because then you get into, okay, how much is this idea worth? We'll give him $10.
it. That's not what he did. It was
I
very
don't want to get into that kind of
everything. Where when the company won, the employees won.
And again, I'm going to come back to what I'm saying. Even with financial incentives, people are still going to focus on getting the job done first
Sure.
instead of taking time for looking at ways that we can make improvements. That's why you have to establish a process for continuous improvement to avoid the default habit of doing things over and over again the same way. Now, let's go to your point about trust. My definition of trust is a belief that people will do the right thing in the right way at the right time. And if you believe that people will do that or the organization is set up to do that, then you're going to trust them. Even in the best of situations, sometimes things go awry. But whether or not it's trying to fix a problem, a lack of trust or breakdown in trust, or whether it's just trying to establish a really strong core of trust, I have some credibility factors, what I call management credibility factors. Number one is caring, care and concern, because nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. You've probably heard that before. Next one is honesty and openness. You got to be open and honest. Next one is responsiveness, because you can be concerning, you can be fair, you can be listening. But if you don't have a commitment to responding and doing what you say you're going to do, what does it matter? Next one is competence. You got to prove that you know what the hell you're doing. Doesn't mean you have to be the smartest person in the room. And then reliability, a little different than responsiveness. Can I count on you to do what you say you're going to do? And then the last one goes to the point you made. When you screw up on one of those other five, which you will if you're a human being,
Sure.
last one is apology and accountability. How do you say, as a manager, as a leader, my bad, I messed up, I made a mistake. We got to shift this, the direction we're going. We got to patch this thing up. I need your help. Tell me what we ought to do.
That's a great point, Les. Thank you. That's super valuable feedback. So there's all this talk, you hear it and that we read it everywhere. All these organizations talking about how they say they value transparency, but employees don't always feel it. In your opinion, what's the difference between talk transparency and actually practicing it?
A lot of organizations are reluctant to be quote unquote transparent because they're afraid employees might not react to or deal with sensitive information in a responsible way. First thing you got to do is believe and trust in your team and understand to the point that you were making when you say, look, here's what the situation is. Here are the things we got to do to address it. Here are some things we got to keep in house. Let's be real clear about that. Now, when you do that in a way that is really open and honest to the point I was making before, clear about what the constraints are for what we can and cannot share with others, that's when it's got to start with confidence and a belief in people. I mean, that's where it comes from. And so, the difference is whether or not I'm willing to share numbers that tell us exactly what our production rate is. Am I willing to share numbers about what our profitability is and what we got to do to make adjustments on that? You just got to be as open as you can possibly be without, I'll just say this, without giving the formula for Coke away. But,
Gotcha.
on beyond that kind of thing, the goal is be as open as you can possibly be and honest and help people explain and why the things need to be done that you express need to be done in an organization often come down to basic numbers. We got to be transparent about those things, transparent about what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in our own production cycle. I mean, it's a matter of being open with people.
So I'm going to throw this one out at you. We talked earlier about how years ago, and I'm guessing this is probably 10 or 15 years ago, probably 15,
Yeah.
you showed me a cultural assessment tool
Yeah.
and I remembered it, which is why I reached out to you
Right.
and invited you on the show today. I thought it was very amazing and interesting then, but
Yeah.
in all candor, I thought you were ahead of your time. I didn't think that the workplace was ready for that, and value of hindsight, I think I was right, but I think the time is right for it now.
Yeah.
No, we have some limitations about in a conversational setting, but how would you describe that tool and what its purpose is,
Sure.
what it is and how it works
Yeah.
to people who are struggling with what's going on, what should I prioritize, and what should I do about it? How would you describe your cultural assessment tool?
Yeah. Well, you hit one of my hot buttons, right? The culture assessment was actually developed many, many years ago with industrial psychologists working with a Baldrige award-winning company. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that group of people shortly after it was developed. And so I got to use that culture assessment, and I had now turned it into a tool that can be done online as opposed to a paper tool. But here's what the main distinction is. The surveys that most people are familiar with are called Likert scale surveys. On a scale of 1 to 5, from strongly agree to strongly disagree, where are we with ABC, XYZ? How my manager talks to me about what's going on in the organization, scale of 1 to 5, what do you, yeah, so on and so forth. And as you probably know from your own personal experience, having done Likert scales, because there isn't a human being alive who hasn't done one, most people tend to go threes and fours, and then maybe a 5 occasionally, 2 occasionally. Rarely is there 1 unless somebody's really upset. And so what you get is kind of a variance that's in the, a high 2 to a low 4. And then the question is, well, what do you do with that? I mean, what's your interpretation of that? And so our tool is very different. We have 40 value statements. And instead of a Likert scale, the people who are participating in the assessment take these all 40 statements on an inverted pyramid, and they put the values that are most like their current culture on the left, least like their current culture on the right. They create a word picture of all of these value statements, and we say move them around until it really looks like the culture you want. Then we flip it over and we say, now do the same thing for the culture you would love to have, your target culture, your desired culture.
Let me feed this back to you. So what you're telling me is you have 40 different statements that describe a culture, and they basically rank priority order in their opinion. This is what our culture is using these word descriptors. And then they also use those same word descriptors and say, this is what I would like it to be.
No, not yet. On this first one, all they're saying is what is most like our current culture and what is least like our current culture. Current culture first.
Gotcha.
Picture, most like, least like. Here's the way we are. Then we do exactly what you said. We flip it over, use the same statements. What are the statements? What are the qualities you would most like to have in your desired culture, the perfect culture, the world you would love to live in? Most like, least like.
So
Same.
we should use, like you're saying, well, these are the things we don't want in our culture that's most important for us to avoid in the culture.
And here are the things we want in our culture.
So can you give me some examples of what some of those word statements would be that would describe the culture so people can visualize this?
Share a sense of purpose.
Okay.
Cover the mistakes of others. Pay
Okay.
attention to hierarchy and status. Work long hours. Demonstrate trust and respect for people. Communicate openly and honestly. And so as you can hear, there are some highly negative kinds of things and some highly positive kinds of things. That's what we want to do. That's how you get this richness of what the results of this thing prints out, because what it will do then at the end, when we show the report, is it shows the precise gap between the current culture and the target culture on every single one of those 40 value statements. And
So
all
what
you,
about managers though? You've got employees that say this is what we want, and the managers may have a totally different view of that.
yeah,
How do you
yeah,
handle that?
yeah, actually, we do that. We get different group reports and we say, let's compare. Let's take a look at these things. And then when we get the management team together, which is how we usually do it to process it, said, here's what you guys said. Here's what the employees said. Why does that gap exist? Why does that gap exist? And then similarly, sometimes you find that they're exactly the same on certain value statements. And you can say, you know what? Here's where you guys are really in alignment with one another. But here where you've got the biggest gaps. Now, even within a group, let's just say it's one group of people. You take these 40 statements and you look at the results, and you will easily spot 3 or 4 things where the gaps are the biggest by far. And then we have a conversation, get people into small groups and say, all right, why do we have these gaps? And what are things we can do to close those gaps? Then we bring the group back together, look for themes, and then we decide on what are some specific actions we're going to take as a group. And then individually, what every person has to do and declare publicly to the rest of the group is what is one thing I'm going to start, one thing I'm going to stop, one thing I'm going to continue in order to reach the desired culture that we say that we want to have in this organization. For anybody who's interested, just so you know, any of your listeners, I have like a 1-minute video that describes how this thing works, and I'd be happy to send it to anybody who's interested.
What do you really do if or how do you manage, navigate, or guide a company through that process if there is a big gap between what the employees say exists and what the management say exists, or what the employees say they want and what the management team says they want? How do you help them navigate that?
Well, goes back to open and honest communication, right? You go in and you say, here's where the differences are. Let me tell you why I viewed it this way. Let me hear why you rated it that way. And then let's talk about how we can find some common ground. No employee in the world has ever wanted to have, let me put it another way, never expected to get every single thing they want exactly the way they want it. No
Sure.
group of people, rational, reasonable group of people does that. So what you have to find is some common ground. It's let's make a deal. Let's make a
So if
deal.
so what you're saying is if there's 5 gaps where there's very differing views between management and team members, that you might find 2 or 3 where they can come to agreement and just focus on those and don't worry about the other stuff yet.
Doesn't
Handle
mean
what
you
you
don't,
handle.
yeah, but it doesn't mean you don't deal with those other things because you do have to deal with those big
You
gaps.
deal with them first.
But you deal with the ones that are most obvious first. Then you can deal with some of the other things by coming to some kind of common ground. I like to talk about because I know a lot of managers who say, well, what the heck it's trying to tell us? Employees ought to be able to do whatever the heck they want to do with their imagination and free will. And I say, no, it's like the human rocket of performance. Okay. If you view this rocket, a human rocket, the thrusters and the boosters are imagination and free will. That's the thing that propels people. Then you need to have what I call stabilizers, right? So your rocket doesn't go all like, and that kind of thing is what really helps people figure out, what is it that gets us stabilized as a group. And then the third one is a guidance system, and that is responsibility and accountability. We all state what our responsibilities are and what we're willing to be held accountable for, from the bottom to the top, across the organization.
So there's a lot of people talking about employee engagement, and some have better ideas than others, but I listen to them all and make my own calls. But if there was one myth about employee engagement that you'd love to bust, what would it be?
One myth. I guess I keep coming back to the fundamental premise that, let me put it another way. It's the belief that employee engagement, getting employees engaged is about being nice to people and giving them lots of trinkets and trash and all this excuse me, trinkets and special things. It's really not about just being nice to people. It's about treating them like adults and understanding. People ask me, what is it what can we do to motivate people, right? And of course, I got this massive, comprehensive employee engagement and alignment system. And I've written a book and I've had 30 articles published and I've given presentations all over. But I can boil it down to 3 things about what really gets people tuned in, turned on, feeling inspired and supported to do their best work and be their best selves. 3 things. Number 1, people want to be informed honestly and timely about current conditions and future direction. They don't want to be left in the dark. They
Good.
need it. Number 2, they want to be heard, valued, and taken seriously for the things that they have to say about how can we make things work better. Heard, valued, taken seriously. Don't give me a deaf ear and give me a means by which I can do that. And the last one, the third one, is that people, goes to the point I made before, especially adult human beings, but all people want to have some control over the decisions and actions that affect their lives in the workplace. And that's what all of my systems and processes are designed to do.
Les, I love that myth that that's a myth worth busting, and it's a common one. But I mean, I look back, playing sports as a kid and growing up, and some of my best coaches, ones I respect the most, they weren't my buddies, they weren't my friends. They didn't give me trinkets, they didn't give me little pats, and I didn't tell me I did good when I didn't. They were honest and they raised standards and they were demanding and they were hard. But I loved and respected those people because I knew that everything that they did for the betterment of me as an athlete and the other athletes that were part of our team.
And I'm not sure if in that particular example, those 3 things I talked to you about were present. I don't know if you were given clear direction and communicated about, where we are, where we're going.
Oh yeah, coaches do. They
I
like
don't know if they listened. The second one, though, I don't know if they really heard you and valued about what you had to say, or if they were just trying to point. But if they,
well, probably not because
yeah,
youth sports, no, because
right.
we didn't know what we didn't know, and they knew that, so they would just direct us. But my
Mm,
point was
yeah,
that the idea of trinkets and being nice
yeah, yeah.
being a myth. That's my
Absolute complete myth.
with so for leaders that are listening right now, what are three, one, two, three, whatever you got, people first practices that they could implement tomorrow
Yeah.
that would have immediate impact?
Well, I already talked about the continuous improvement huddle. Absolutely number one, the continuous improvement huddle. Another thing is what I call constructive accountability. And I can't emphasize this enough. Research shows that more than 80% of the workforce, when they hear the word accountability, it has negative connotations. And that's because it's used more as a club to beat people down instead of a ladder to lift them up. I have a mechanism and a process, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, for constructive accountability that really, first of all, let's get clear on expectations. Smart goals is one way to do it, whatever. Let's execute. And then when you get down to the point where you're saying, okay, where are we right now? If somebody isn't meeting the goal, you don't start beating up on them or meeting the task or whatever. You say, what's getting in the way? What's getting in the way? Because I know I can count on you guys to do a good job. If you're not, something's getting in the way. Now, they may come up with a bull crap kind of excuse, but at least we're trying to say, look, what's getting in the way? Not why aren't you doing that? We can't count on you, blah, blah, blah. Then we listen to what they have to say. We make adjustments. We renegotiate the agreement, come around the second time. And the last thing you say is, what is it you need from me or anybody else on this team to make sure that you can live up to that commitment the next time? Because that kind of puts them on the spot, number one. Secondly, it says, we got your back. You're not alone. We're going to help you make sure this gets done. All of that is grounded in one phrase. Mason, I'll tell you, of all the things that I've ever said in my presentations and I've written, this is the one that people find most impactful and most memorable. When the crap hits the fan, and it will, always treat people as the source of the solution, not the cause of the problem. Always treat people as a source of the solution, not the cause of the problem. Now, you tell me, why should they do that? Why should we do that?
They will respond. How do I phrase this? They will respond as you expect them to. If you treat them like they're a problem, they will live up to that expectation. If you
That's
treat
right.
them like a solution, they're going to live up to that, and self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, it gives them some agency, some way to deal with it. All right, let's talk about what's the solution here? And I'll tell you the biggest thing. It eliminates defensiveness. Nobody in the history of the world has ever done their best work when they're feeling defensive. Never. So
So
always, yeah, go ahead.
you're right on the money with that. So I also read a blog from yours years ago that the little light bulb went off and said, this is another reason why I need to call less. First one was I remembered your culture assessment tool. The second one is I remember a blog you wrote years ago about the difference between preactive and proactive. Can you talk a little bit about that with our audience and tell them why you think it's helpful to know the difference?
Yeah. Well, so I always try to use little word tricks to try and get people's heads wrapped around things. You know that from working with me. And so one point in time, I said, I'm not sure I really can tell the difference between being proactive and being active. But I do know what it means to be preactive. Prepare, predict, preempt, prevent, all of those good pre words, which is really implicit in the word proactive. But if you think about it as being preactive, then you can actually get people's heads turned around because everybody says we need to create a safety mindset around here, right? I'm going to use safety as an example. You can't create a safety mindset just by talking with people and telling them safety is important or putting posters on the wall. You have to engage them in a conversation and a dialogue and a thought process about problem solving. And here's a very simple one. You do this for several weeks. Supervisors, managers go to employees and say, Where are we going to have an accident or likely to have an accident next week? I mean, that completely shifts their mind. Whoa, next week. Oh, well, let me see. You know what? We've got these cords running across the walkway here. That could cause somebody to trip. Or we have this way that we're processing the fluids from this machine that sometimes might fall on, whatever. So the managers and supervisors gather all these ideas. They take them to a meeting, let's just say Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. What did you hear? List all those things, look for common themes, and you pick one thing. You go back to everybody in the plant and you say, okay, here's the one thing we're going to focus on next week. Be on the lookout for it. Let us know if you see any hazard related to that. Let's take action on it. Now, good thing is all those other things that you talked about, what might happen next week, are bubbling in the back of their brain. The likelihood of that incident happening in the next week is almost zero. You do it again the next week, and the next week, and the next week for 2 or 3 months. Now, guess what? After 3 months, what's that doing to the mindset?
They're focused.
Doing to the mindset. They're focusing on what's going to possibly cause an accident next week or maybe tomorrow. You can do the same thing with quality. Where are we going to break down in quality? Next week.
I like the sense of urgency because a friend of mine once told me, he said, he runs a business, very successful one. And he told me, he said, people blow stuff off because they think, oh, there's just a 1 in a million chance that'll happen. Well, if you're in business and you do large amount of transactions, that means after you hit 1 million transactions, it's going to happen once. Now, when that is, you don't know, but we want to be prepared, especially if that event is catastrophic. If you just think about that'll maybe not never happen, but there's a 1 in a million chance. But to take, like you said, the focus down to what could happen next week.
Yeah,
Now you're not talking about things that are 1 in a million and is virtually
it
impossible. You're
is
talking.
not hypothetical.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you. You talked about how the principle applies in quality improvement, quality control.
Yeah, same thing. Basically, where are we likely to have a quality breakdown next week? Same thing.
So, looking ahead, what timeless principles do you believe will only grow in importance over the next 5, 10 years?
So, yeah, I don't know if it's going to grow. It's like it's always been there, It's like, first of all, let's make sure that we're looking at systemic change when we're trying to engage people. What's systemic and substantive, and don't get caught up in the program trap. I really make sure that if we're interested in getting employees engaged, we're interested in engaging them in systematic continuous improvement. We're interested and committed to getting them supported and inspired to create a high performance culture of trust by allowing them to do their best work in their best selves. I mean, anything that we can do in that regard. Those three imperatives that I told you about, what people want. They want to be informed. They want to be heard. They want to be valued. They want to have some control. Going to be increasingly important, I think, just as a recognition of human beings. I came up with a phrase a long time ago, um, and it may sound a little reductive, and I apologize if it does, but getting employees really totally engaged is as simple as ABC. A, they want to achieve. B, they will want to belong. C, they want to contribute. Anything you can do to really make people feel that they are able to satisfy those three driving needs is going to be critical. Constructive accountability, I cannot emphasize enough how important that has always been, is now, and always will be. And then I also have a model for organizational communication. Everybody knows it's really important, but there are some basic criteria for effective organizational communication that are critically important. Number one is kind of what I talked about before. It's interactive. I always kind of joke with people when they say, "What we need around here is more two-way communication." You know what I say to them? What the
What?
hell other kind is there? And they say, well, we send out messages and we put on presentations and we do our town hall meetings and we present stuff. And I'm saying, oh, you mean message distribution? I thought you were talking about communication. So that's one. We also have to understand that speed is important. Can't just, do these orderly reviews. Let's make sure that people have the information they need spontaneously, immediately, when it's essential. We have to make sure that it is, let's see, what are some of the other key criteria? We have to have the right kinds of processes in place, the thing I was talking about before. We have to make sure that we are listening to the things that really matter most to people. So I actually have a 7-point model, and I'm kind of rambling a little bit around it right now, but I'm more than happy to share that with people as well. So those are some things that are going to be critically.
Knows I'm gonna make sure that everyone knows how to get a hold of you and find you on the
Yeah,
web and all that good stuff.
right.
I got just a couple more questions for you quick.
Yeah, sure.
If a CEO came to you today and said, "We're losing our best people, what should I do first?" What would your answer be?
Boy, I'm going to go back to my communication thing. You've got to listen, and you've got to listen in a variety of different ways. I mean, you can do surveys, you can do focus groups, you can do one on ones. We only find out, we do exit interviews sometimes in organizations to find out why are you leaving. How often do we do stay interviews?
Talk about that.
Stay interviews. What is keeping you here now? What might keep you from staying here? And what can we do to make sure that you do stay here? Because we value you. That's a stay interview. Too often we wait until people are angry or walking out the door to say, "Oh my God, no, what can we do?" And then we do all kinds of things to try and keep them, right? We say, "Oh, we'll be nice to you, or we'll give you this, or we'll give you more money, or whatever." And you know what people are thinking? Bull crap.
Yeah, should I
And
give
I
that to
can
you?
tell you a personal example. The woman who cuts my hair. You like the job she does?
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
Yeah, I know. The woman who cuts my hair worked for this one hairdresser for 20 years or so, and they kept cutting back on support things like a helper to do the washing of the hair before she could actually do the cutting, and a variety of other things. I don't want to get into the details, but there were a whole bunch of things that she kept saying, "Well, why are you doing that?" And of course, she was a real high performer, and finally she was looking around and she found this other place that really had all of that stuff already built in. They didn't have to convince her. And so as soon as she said, "I'm leaving," guess what they said they would do?
All that stuff.
Everything she wanted. And you know what she said? Bull crap. Goodbye.
Yep. So, I know that you're a fan of, big slogans. As you've so clearly communicated earlier about signs on the walls and stuff,
Yeah.
if you could put just one sentence on every company wall, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm kind of torn, but I think I would have to default to the one I said before. Always treat people as a source of the solution, not the cause of the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Les, I really appreciate you. I've known you for a very, very long time, and, like, I love your culture assessment. I thought it was ahead of its time when I first saw it, and I think the timing of it right now is probably excellent. I think
Yeah.
it's a tool that can help a lot of businesses do a lot of good quickly without wasting time, talent, resources, or energy. I've had the privilege of seeing it, so I know it's very, very, very powerful and gives amazing focus. I appreciate all your wisdom. If people
There
want to know about you and the work you do, what's the best way for them to connect with you or to find out more?
Yeah, I want to share a couple of quick things with you before we do that. One is this does not require a transformation engagement that creates a lot of burden, a lot of distraction. There are very simple things you can do, like the ones that I was talking about. So take small steps that can really make a difference, but make sure that they are process oriented, not one-off activities. The other thing that I want to do, because I think you actually talked about this in our conversation when we were preparing for this podcast, what kind of impact does this have on customers? And I want to share an example with one of my clients. It was a private duty in-home care service nationwide, but this was the St. Louis franchise of this nationwide organization. And when we implemented this stuff, and I'm going to grab this because I want to make sure I have the numbers right, they were having some problems with their core processes functioning, and their financial performance had been flat over several years. And after we implemented a lot of these activities that we're talking about, the result after 1 year, I'll give you some numbers. The revenue was up 14%, profit was up 39%, caregiver satisfaction scores went up from 79% to 93%. Client satisfaction scores went up from 83% to 91%. And this was all the result of this continuous improvement engagement model. Employees generated over 300 implemented improvements that resulted in those results, or that produced those results. And here's the thing I love about what the president said. I'll never forget this quote. She said, "Nothing ever goes fast enough for me. But if you had told me that we would get the kind of results we've gotten, the kind of engagement I've gotten from my team, the kind of performance that they're demonstrating in just 6 weeks, I would have never believed you."
That's pretty. What size company was this? How many employees are we talking about?
About 150.
Okay, that's solid. So, how do people find if they want to accomplish the same type of stuff,
Yeah.
the same principles and whatnot, and they want to learn more about you, your books, website? What's the best way for them to connect with Les Landis?
So obviously, you can have my email address, which I will give to you. I don't have it on the screen, but it's Les Landis. And let me spell Landis because everybody gets it wrong. It's LES, Les, LANDES at landisassociates.com. And you can always go on my website. There's just tons of information, ways to get connected with me on there as well. And that's just www.landisassociates.com.
Are you active on LinkedIn?
Not terribly. I do some stuff on LinkedIn, but not a lot. But usually, if somebody is trying to contact me by LinkedIn, I'll get a notification by email. But
Yeah,
email and phone is usually the best.
cool. Les, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure visiting with you, and I always learn when we visit, and I hope those listening and watching today did too. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for joining.
great. Thank you.